Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I'm going to talk about all the books that I managed to read in the month of September. So September was a pretty crazy reading month because I wanted to do 2 month-long readathons combined together. So I needed to read a total of 10 books, 5 for each readathon. I actually managed to read all 10, which is really exciting. So I completed the Newt's readathon, which is made by G over at Book Roast. That readathon originally took place in August, but personally for myself, for my schedule, I moved it to September. I also did the Adventures Through Wonderland middle grade readathon as well, which was so much fun. And that one I also had to read 5 books. So I technically successfully graduated Hogwarts and am now a trader of magical tomes. I wish. That would be amazing. And I also successfully adventured through Wonderland, so it was great times. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about all 10 books. I'm not going to delve into the readathons and talk about the prompts or anything because that's going to make this even longer. I've got 10 different books to talk about, and I want to try to keep this snappy for you all. I will still be looking at my notes every once in a while just to make sure that I remember what I want to say, and I'll also be pulling the majority of the book covers onto my Kindle and doing that as well so that you're able to see the covers. So let's go ahead and jump into the very first book that I read in September, and that book is very appropriate for this time of year, and it is called The Haunted by Danielle Vega. This is a YA horror mystery, I guess you could say. This story, we follow this girl who, her and her family have just moved to this small town. They moved into this old home that her parents are renovating. After they move in and she starts her high school career there in this town, she ends up finding out that the house that they moved into is kind of the infamous creepy house in this town. It's the house that teenagers will try to get each other to go in the house and do dares for. Apparently horrible things have happened in this home. People have committed suicide. People have died in this house, all sorts of things. And so it's just this really creepy house, and people just say up and down, it's haunted. Just swear up and down it's haunted. And then once she moves in and after she hears the stories and everything, first she's like, oh, it's probably just superstition. And then crazy, weird, creepy things start to happen in the house. And she finds out that it is indeed crazy haunted. I'm going to be completely honest. This is the most terrifying book up to this point that I had ever read. It is legitimately scary. I was really terrified reading this book, but I personally loved it. For some reason, when it comes to creepy books and reading them, I'm fine and I have fun reading it. If I were to see this as a movie or TV show, I would probably be too scared to watch it, to be perfectly honest. If I were to actually see the things happening, not just in my mind, I probably would run screaming from the room. There's some terrifying stuff in this book, to be honest. Let me look at my notes here and see if there's anything I'm forgetting, because this was 10 books ago. So yeah, it has ultimate haunted house terror, no passive ghosts here. It's a very fast-paced and quick read. I enjoyed every aspect of this book. I enjoyed the characters, the plot, the intrigue, all of it. The only thing that bugged me is I think it had a timing plot hole, but I'm not 100% sure. Other than that, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book a lot. If you want some genuine haunted house creeps, this is it for you. And honestly, I haven't really heard of anybody else that has read this. I kept seeing it in bookstores, but I never really saw anyone talk about it on a booktube. I've never seen anybody really read it. So if you've read this book, let me know. And I just love to talk with someone about it because it was really fun to read. It was really creepy. And also, the second book in this series, and I don't know if it's a duology, I don't know if there's going to be more, but the next book just came out in July, which I'm planning to read this month. So it was fun. So 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, the next one, I completely changed what type of book I was reading, and I went to a middle grade, and that one is A Tale of Magic by Chris Colfer. If you've ever heard of the Land of Stories series, the middle grade series by Chris Colfer, it is a 6-book series. It is fantastic. It's a mashup of a whole bunch of different fairy tales, and it's so much fun. This is a new series that he has started that is connected to the Land of Stories, and it's actually a prequel. We follow a lot of kind of the adult characters as their kids in this one. This one was so much fun. And this one we were learning about how basically the fairy council gets established, how magic gets established in the kind of magical fairy world that we read about in the Land of Stories. So it was really, really fun to read. And this book so much reminded me of why I love the Land of Stories and why I love Chris Colfer's writing. He's very imaginative. He creates these really intricate worlds that are easy to understand. I feel like the world building is so seamless. It doesn't feel like it's a chore learning about the world. His characters are complex and have just like really good, genuine feelings and emotions and depth to them. And I just love that. The stories have a lot of complexity. And on top of that, whenever he puts in some kind of plot twist, I don't see it coming. I don't know if it's just me or what, but he's really good at a plot twist. And middle grade books, I mean, this is middle grade at its finest, to be honest. I absolutely enjoyed it so much and was so glad I finally got around to reading it. The second book in this series just came out as well. I think it's September. And so I'm really excited to jump into the second one hopefully soon, because this one was so much fun. I really enjoyed all the characters and the magic aspect of all of it. It was a good time. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend. The next one I did was another middle grade, but it fits a little bit more with the kind of fall feel. And that was part of the second book in a duology, and that is The Last Life of Prince Alastor by Alexandra Bracken. This is the Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding's second book in the series, and I personally did not like this one quite as much as the first one. Let me explain really quick about what the series is about if you've never heard about it before. In the first book, we are following this boy named Prosper Redding. He comes from this very wealthy family who lives in this small town. They're kind of like the main head family in this small town that kind of run everything. It's always like the mayoral position and all that kind of stuff. And they're just like this really prominent family in this town. And they've had a lot of success. But there's a reason for that. Years and years and years ago, his like great-great-great-grandfather or something made a deal with a demon for his family to have lasting success and wealth. So he made a deal with that demon, but the problem is one of their ancestors actually ended up breaking that deal. And because of that, this demon is now out for vengeance against this family. So what happens in the first book, this isn't a spoiler, this is in the regular description of the book, Prosper Redding ends up getting a demon possessed inside him, the very demon that made the deal with the family, and he's trying to enact his revenge through this boy with his family. And it sounds like a dark, creepy thing for middle grade, which it is, but it's also really fun because the demon is very snarky. And so you just kind of have like this constant pull and tug of this teenage kid who's just trying to get through life. And then he's possessed by a demon who's just like this really, really weird, moody, snarky demon that's just making him do stuff. And it just ends up being really funny. So that's the first book. In the second book, we follow more of a magical aspect. We end up following Prosper as he goes into sort of this underworld or this otherworldly place that the demon is actually from. So it has a much more fantastical aspect to it and a lot of world building. The first book takes place in our world. It takes place during Halloween. It's very much fall and it's got a really great atmosphere to it. This one just felt so different than the first one and didn't have the fall vibes that I was really hoping for and wanting. This one just had a lot more of a fantasy element to it, which I like fantasy normally, but I just didn't really enjoy the particular world that we were in. Yes, it was a dark world, but it would just, I don't know, I didn't really enjoy being in it. I didn't feel like the world building to me felt a little clunky. I just really wasn't into the second one as much. I could have left off just reading the first one, to be honest. First one is well worth the read and is a perfect fall read for this time of year. But the second one kind of was a disappointment to me. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. So it was just kind of middle of the road, kind of meh for me. All right, after that, I went on to read a classic. Wait, what? Who is she? I don't normally read classics, and this is one I've been hearing about a lot just in BookTube lately, I feel like, and it's one that really intrigued me, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So I had a little bit of a weird stop and start with this book when I began, because I got a copy and put it on my Kindle, and I started reading it, and it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the language is old enough because this book is written by Oscar Wilde. It's a classic. It's a much older book. So I was expecting to have more flowery language, more of an older style of speaking and writing. And I started reading it and it felt really kind of disjointed. It didn't feel as old as it should have been. And the chapters were going by really quick. The story was going by real quick. I was like, something is not right here. And so I ended up looking it up and kind of poking around and realized, oh, I have the abridged version. This is not what I want. I want the unabridged. I want the original Oscar Wilde story. So I had to restart. The book. I got a different copy, the actual copy that I wanted to read, restarted it, and I actually really enjoyed this a lot. I did. So if you've never heard of this story before, we are following this young man who is very, very handsome, and people kind of follow him around and kind of attach to him because he's just so handsome and he's just so good looking and he's smart and he's wealthy and he just has everything going for him. Until he starts thinking about the fact that once his beauty wears away, once he starts to get older, he's going to lose this notoriety that he has. He's going to lose this drive and pull that he has with other people, and he wants to keep that. And so he ends up having a portrait done of him, but somehow this portrait ends up having some kind of magical, strange quality to it, to where the painting starts morphing and changing with the aging he's supposed to be getting. And it also changes with the kind of the quality of his soul. So if he is doing bad things to other people, the reflection of who he is deep inside is reflecting in this painting. So he himself is not aging. He's looking as young and handsome as ever, but his painting, if you were to see it, he looks old and deformed and draggled and honestly just terrifying to look at. And Dorian actually becomes fascinated with his painting. He hides it away in a room so no one else can see it because he doesn't want anyone to see kind of his deepest, darkest self. But also he's fascinated by it. He's fascinated by all these things that he kind of manipulates and does in his life because he ends up doing some terrible things. And he goes and is fascinated to look at this painting and be like, this is the quality of what my soul is now. And for some reason, he's fascinated by that. It is a dark and creepy, foreboding story. It is way darker and had some more like jarring things in it than I ever expected. It has suicide in it, murder, like just all sorts of stuff I was not expecting in this book, to be honest, of a classic. I didn't expect it to be so shocking in some parts as well. I really enjoyed this a lot, and I honestly felt like it was relatively easy to follow given the fact that it has some older language to it. I actually really enjoyed Oscar Wilde's writing. I will say there was one chapter just randomly, I would say it's probably about halfway or a little past halfway in the book, there was one chapter that I had so much trouble following, and it was kind of this inner dialogue that Dorian was having with himself. He ends up getting obsessed with this specific book that his friend recommends to him, and in this book, he's because of the book, he's starting to think through a lot of different things that the book talks about, and it becomes a lot more of an internal, very artistic thinking of how he looks at the world. I don't know. I was so lost in that chapter, and I don't really feel like it carried on the plot at all. It just felt like Oscar Wilde was showing off and trying to think how many flowery ways he could say different things. And all of a sudden, the next chapter, we're like, whoop, back in the plot. And then I understood what was going on, and it was great. So that, other than that one chapter, this was a really fun read, and I really enjoyed it a lot. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And it definitely gets me more interested in reading some more classics because that was fun, and also to read some more Oscar Wilde as well. After that, I read a book that is pretty outside of my normal reading, but I was really excited to read because I've heard so many good things, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This story, we follow Daisy and the Six. This takes place in the late 1960s, early 1970s, about this band called The Six and Daisy Jones, who ends up joining the band as a singer. The band ends up rising in fame, becoming absolutely huge. Everybody knows about them. Everyone is obsessed with Daisy Jones and obsessed with this band. And then at the height of the career, the band breaks up and nobody really knows why. This book is their story, and it is told in interview format. So it's a little bit of a different format, and it's a story about what really happened. What happened to this band? How did they really come together? How did their tours really go? How and why did the band come apart? And this was so much fun. I'm going to look at my notes for this one because I want to make sure I know what I want to talk about. The characters felt complex and real. Totally so. The plot was fast-paced with consistent intrigue throughout. When I finished it, it felt like real events that had happened. I immediately wanted to look up the people and the music. I immediately want to look up and see where they are now. I wanted to look up things that were described in this book. Like, there was such unique and descriptions about their album cover and how iconic it was. And I wanted to see it. There were descriptions about their songs and the lyrics, and I wanted to hear them. And it's incredible the fact that this book does that to you. You read this book and you feel like it's a real band. You feel like it's real people, and this really happened. I'm very excited to say that Amazon is actually creating a miniseries of this story, which I'm so excited about, because that means we'll actually hopefully get to be able to hear these songs for legit. And I think it's going to be really, really cool to be able to hear the songs finally and to have a little bit more, I don't know, something to be able to react to with this after you read it. It's so good. I have heard that the audiobook is fantastic. I just strictly read this. The audiobook is supposed to have a full cast, and because it's an interview format, I think it would be a really fantastic way to enjoy this story. So if you're an audiobook person, I would recommend this because I've heard it's really incredible. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars as well, and it was so much fun. I did enjoy it more than Taylor Jenkins Reid's other book, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That one was really good too, but this one was really cool, and it felt so real. After I did that, I jumped into some more middle grade, and this truly is probably the most cozy middle grade book I have ever read. So if you want something cozy to read, do it. This is Pages & Co. Tilly and the Bookwanderers by Anna James. This is a middle grade series. We're following this girl who lives with her grandparents in London. Her grandparents owned like this 5-story bookstore, and they actually live in the bookstore as well. There's an apartment in the back of the bookstore that they live in, and Tilly ends up finding out that she is actually a book wanderer, which means she is able to go into stories. She actually meets characters: Anne of Green Gables, Sarah from Little Princess, Alice from Alice in Wonderland. My goodness, guys. The vibes in this book, I mean, just think about rainy, just like a rainy day, roaring fires in a bookstore. There's a cafe in this bookstore where you can get like coffee and pastries. There are fireplaces and couches and things throughout the store that you can like go lounge in. This sounds amazing. I want this to be a real bookstore, guys. And it just sounded, I mean, she lives there. That's the thing, she lives there. And then on top of that, she's able to go and like meet all these characters that she loves so much. I mean, how cool is that? So I'm going to read some of my comments here just so I don't miss anything. It's such a cozy read, 5-story bookshop set in London with a cafe, cool rainy weather outside. It's such a fun concept and magic system of traveling into books. Tilly's favorite characters and books are my favorites as well, such as Alice in Wonderland, Anne of Green Gables, Little Princess. I enjoyed seeing how the characters interacted in a real conversation. So it was really fun to see how, like, if you were to have a conversation with Alice from Alice in Wonderland, what would that be like? If you want to know, there you go, read this. It was really fun to just have kind of like a present day interaction with these famous characters. It was so fun. It made me realize how many of my books I would not want to travel into. Way too much risk. So some of the magic system with this is when she goes into these books, things can still happen to you. Like, you can die there and get harmed there or whatever. And so I started thinking like about some of my favorite books, and I'll be like, I wouldn't want to travel there. There's too much danger there. Like, it's like, it'd be really cool to go to Hogwarts, but I would be a muggle. I wouldn't be one of the characters. I would be me. So I wouldn't be able to do magic. Also, there's Voldemort and the Death Eaters and all of that. So most of my favorite books are scary books. I love reading them, but I wouldn't want to go there. So it was just really interesting to think about like what books would I not want to go to because it'd be actually too dangerous or something. So it was really interesting to think about, but it was just such a cozy, fun read. I just highly recommend it. This is a book for book lovers, and it was just pure magic. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars as well. Lots of 4 out of 5 stars this month. The next one I read was another middle grade, and it was the type of middle grade that I adore so much because it is a ghost story. I love ghost stories, specifically middle grade, and this is one I had not heard of at all. I just bought it on a whim, and you guys, it's amazing. You need to read it. It is called The Swallow, a Ghost Story by Charis, Cotter. This story, we follow 2 girls. So we've got this girl over here who lives in a big family. She lives in a family that has a bunch of foster kids, and she feels like she is ignored and not getting the attention from her birth parents that she should be because of all these other kids and everything. And she just wants to be noticed, and she wants to be in the place that's quiet. She's used to the loud house, and she just wants to be in a corner with her favorite book and wants her parents to give her some attention. And she also loves to read ghost stories. She loves ghosts. She would love to be able to see a ghost one day. Then we got this girl over here who moves into the house next door. This girl's a little strange. She's real quiet, really withdrawn. And the thing is, she actually has been able to see ghosts ever since she was born. And she doesn't want to tell anybody because she doesn't want to end up getting shut up in a nut house. But she sees ghosts everywhere and she's terrified of them and wants them to leave her alone. And then one day, these two girls end up meeting and becoming unlikely friends. And they end up kind of running into a ghost that they're trying to see if they can help move on. It's kind of more of a malevolent spirit, but they're trying to help this spirit move on. There's so much more to the story than that, but you guys, it's so good. The atmosphere is fantastic. It's a perfect ghost story full of friendship and mystery. The story felt very well paced and had good dimension. Characters had distinct personality differences. One of the things I liked about this book is that every chapter had it sectioned into two sections, one being in one girl's perspective and the one in the other girl's perspective. So whatever was happening or they were interacting with, we got to see into the minds of both characters, which I really enjoyed a lot. We got to learn a lot about these two girls and understanding their personalities and their perspectives and their thoughts and feelings really well, which I thought was a really cool way to tell the story because it added so much dimension to these characters. There's lots of surprising moments and spooky fun. I highly recommend. This one was so good, and actually one of my friends is borrowing it right now. I really hope she loves it because this one was fantastic, and I could see myself definitely reading this again one day. I really enjoyed it a lot. So please try out The Swallow. It's so much fun. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Let's keep the spooky times going, shall we? So one of my favorite authors of all time, if you've been around at all, you know this, say it with me, Mary Downing Hahn. She is a middle grade, she mostly writes middle grade ghost stories. And she usually comes out with them every year. She's one of my favorite authors because it got me into reading a lot when I was a kid because I loved reading ghost stories and she wrote a lot of them and I kept getting them from the library over and over until I made my own collection, which I got over here. So she came out with a new one this year that was a little bit different called The Puppets, Payback, and Other Chilling Tales. This is a collection of several small, short ghost stories or like creepy stories that she put into one book, which is something I don't think she's done before, kind of put together a little collection of short stories. But this one was a lot of fun. Was it one of her best ones? No, it's not. Mainly because the stories are very short, so there's not a lot of world building or character development that can happen. It honestly felt like reading a bunch of episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps, if you know what I'm talking about, if you've seen those shows. Some of my childhood memories right there. But that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of something like you would sit around the campfire and you'd read one of these stories. They're really short. They're only a few pages long. Some of them were better than others. There were some that were truly creepy. Some of them were kind of more silly, on the silly end. But I really enjoyed reading this, and I look forward to hopefully, like, when my daughter's a little older, being able to read some of these to her, like, in the fall and, like, at a campfire. That'd be really fun. Just have, like, a campfire in the backyard and, like, read some of these spooky stories. So it was fun. I did enjoy it. It wasn't her best work, but I had a good time kind of reading these short stories. It just gave me a few little spooky, cozy stories to read, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Now let's move on to some adult, shall we? This one is truly very different than anything that I usually have read because this one, I thought going into it was going to be a fiction, but I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure it's like a diary memoir. Would you call it a memoir? It's diary entries of a bookseller. This is called The Diary of a Bookseller by Shaun Bythell. This is about a bookstore that is in Scotland, and it follows the bookstore owner and his everyday dealings with a bookstore, of running a secondhand bookstore. So it's set in diary entries. It's honestly plotless because it's basically a year's worth of diary entries of things that happen in this bookstore. Conversations he has with clients or customers, him looking for collections of books from other people that are looking to sell books to him to sell in his store, interactions he has with the people that work for him. There's some like goofy, kooky things that happen. It was really fun to read, but it was very different. It's insightful. It's an insightful look at the trade and effect of book sales and Amazon book sales as well, just kind of how they're kind of fighting a lot with online book sales and how a lot of the larger online sellers like Amazon can kind of undercut them when it comes to pricing because they are able to sell them so cheap. And a lot of times they have difficulty selling books because of that. And so that was really interesting to read. There were some really funny and laugh out loud moments in this story. Because of the nature of the book, just day-to-day musings with no plot. It's a good side read type of book to pick up for a few minutes. It's not the kind of book you're going to sit and read it for hours and binge read. It's the kind of book where, you know, it's like, okay, I've got 10 more minutes before I have to go back to work. Let me read a chapter or two, and then set it down and you're fine. You don't feel like you've got this overlooming plot of what happens. You're just able to sit, read a few things, get up and walk away, and it's fine. So it's a very kind of side read. If you're wanting just have something fun to read on the side, just something simple, this is a good one to do. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't love it because I like plot. I like having some plot and some intrigue, something to move the story along. This isn't a story. It's a diary, and it was fun to read, and I enjoyed it, and it was insightful, and it was fun, and it was interesting, but at the same time, it's not my kind of book, but I did enjoy it. All right, let's go ahead and jump to the last book, and this is actually one I own, and I forgot to get it down, so let me grab it. It is called Evangeline of the Bayou by Jan Eldredge. First of all, that's a cool cover. So in this story, we are following this girl here named Evangeline. She has been in a line of these witches that protect the area of New Orleans. She lives in the Bayou of New Orleans, and she is in this long line of people who have protected them. And so she is nearing her 13th birthday, I think, and she's been training underneath her grandmother to be able to be one of these, what do they call them? I can't remember what they called them. There's it wasn't a witch. They called themselves something else, but they were basically witches. And she was training to how to stop these monsters. Sorry, my brain is fried at the second. I've gone through a lot of books at this point. So she is learning how to be able to stop or destroy all these different monsters that wreak havoc throughout the area. And she's waiting for her powers to come to be. Usually if they don't come by her 13th birthday, then she won't get any powers. And one of the things that she's waiting for is for her familiar to come, because in this particular line of witches, each witch has a familiar come to them, and that's when their powers are realized as well. And so she keeps waiting for her familiar, and she wants to be kind of a great monster hunter like her family is before her mother was before her grandmother is before her, all of that. And so this is everything to her. And so we end up following her as she is learning how to be a monster hunter. Of course, there is a very specific plot of something to follow in here, but I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to spoil anything. I enjoy the swamp New Orleans setting. I was glad to read a book that focused on a certain type of creature that I don't feel is often used. And I don't want to say what creature it is because I don't want to spoil anything. There's a certain creature in here that I really enjoyed. It's kind of a well-known monster, and I was glad that it was in there because it's not one that I've seen in books that often, at least for the ones that I read, to be perfectly honest. It got quite creepy and intense towards the end for a middle grade. There's some parts I was like, oh snap, is this really happening right now? Okay, I guess it's happening right now. So it got a little intense in there. I always love the idea of a witch having a familiar. I always think it's so cool, the idea of having this, it's not like a pet, it's just this animal that is bonded to you and is like your friend, and it protects you and it helps you, and you just have this certain bond with it. And I just love the idea of that. I love the idea of having familiars. I think it's so cool. Personally, I felt like a lot of the plot points were predictable in this book, but it was still really enjoyable. There were some twists and plot points that I saw coming, but sometimes that happens. It's a middle grade, right? I mean, it's supposed to be for younger readers. You know, I'm 32 years old. I'm not a middle grade reader, so I probably will see a lot of plot twists coming. But I did really enjoy this a lot, and this was a fun read. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Woo! That was a lot of books. And that was a lot of talking. I apologize if I kind of stumbled over my words. I hope everything I said made sense. That was a really fun month of reading, though. I read some really, really cool books. Have you read any of these before? If you have read any of these books, please let me know down below. I would love to be able to chat with you about them. Let me know how your September month of reading went. Did you get to read a lot of books? What was your favorite book you read in September? Let me know down below. I'd appreciate it. On this side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel. Follow me on my book journey. I would love for you to join the Book Boop family. On this side over here is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch another one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock. Don't forget to keep reading. Bye.